I'm a volunteer at Radio 191 FM, and I'm a huge music nerd and just like really passionate about music, and thought I'd just come and share a bunch of songs I've been listening to recently and what I've been really enjoying and recommend some more music to people. So why am I doing this? Well, generally I'm just like a big music fan, so I really wanted to just have another outlet to actually kind of share my music. As I've mentioned, I volunteer at Radio 1, so it's my student radio that I just go on 2 to 4 p.m. on Sundays, New Zealand Standard Time, and I have a show called Food, off of doing some food album, of course. I'm a huge music and food nerd, so it makes sense for me to have a show about music and food. But yeah, I'm really just passionate about music, and I wanted another outlet to come and actually just talk about songs I've been listening to, because on radio it's very varied how much I can genuinely talk about, like, just the songs I've been listening to. I can play them obviously, but the amount of time I really have to dedicate to talking about the songs themselves is quite limited, because, you know, it is just a voluntary thing. It's not fully my show to, you know, just do anything I want creatively. But with this, it gives me full creative freedom to just talk about anything I want, any music, any random shit. So just, yeah, that's kind of the point of this. Well, first and foremost, the first artist and couple of songs slash EP I'm going to be talking about is Remi Wolf. So she's this, I'm not sure actually how new she is, but I know she's been blowing up recently, probably heavily due to TikTok, because I know her song Photo ID, which I'll absolutely be getting to, blew up on TikTok, so she got a lot of notoriety from that. But her EP, I'm Allergic to Dogs, right behind me, is so fantastic. I really love EPs, and I've been listening to EPs since like I was like just into high school. I've been really frothing EPs, and I hadn't fallen in love with an EP this much in so long, since probably Unlocked 1.5, which I have to take that back. EP1 and EP2 by JP Mafia were the two most recent EPs that I have fallen in love with. This EP I really did fall in love with. It is just pop music. It's kind of like bedroom pop, verging indie. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe she produced a lot of it herself. And I feel like it's definitely verging on just like the spectrum between pop and hyperpop. Like, I'm a huge hyperpop fan, and I'd really love to see Remi Wolf actually like dedicate an EP or something, some tracks at least, to like verging into hyperpop like fully, and really like getting into that world, because I feel like her music fits it perfectly. It's just really upbeat, kind of like fast, a lot of different little pieces within the production, different like different voices, different like kinds of production. It's just really awesome. I feel like it really fits within that hyperpop scene, so I really want to see her go into that. But this EP is just so fantastic. It's only 5 tracks, just like a 20 minutes or so runtime. 16 minutes runtime. And yeah, it's really fantastic, and I highly recommend just going and checking it out. Secondly, I mentioned previously MF Doom. I've actually, funnily enough, only more so recently started to really get into Doom. I know he's like he's a huge artist, especially within like a lot of strong hip hop fans, but and I know what he's referred to as your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. Just, yeah. But yeah, I've been really, I really fell in love with Food earlier, and I listened to that album over and over and over and over again, and it's so fantastic. I still think so far it is my favorite, just personally, but I've been listening to Mad Villainy recently, and it is a really killer album. One of the things that really made me start to absolutely love and appreciate Doom was my friend Felix. He was talking about Doom and his rapping, and was just talking about how chill it is, and just like it's just so timeless, and just like it's so easy and effortless to just sit there and have it on all the time and just like listen to it mellowly. But it's also just such incredible lyricism and just like amazing rapping, just everything about like the production, with like obviously Madlib, Quasimodo, and everything on this track, like on this album, should I say. It's so incredible, and obviously there's like a lot of history behind, like, you know, the album cover and all these different things, so it's really got a lot to it, and it's just such an easy to listen to, just incredible hip-hop album that I just really just like want to have on just in the background of my head just all the time. Okay, the next artist slash album I kind of want to talk about is Peachtree Rascals. I actually know very little about this group. I know it is a group of kind of pop R&B kind of artists. I believe, at least. Correct me if I'm wrong again. But Camp Nowhere is such a good listen album. It's just so nice and chill and just like... I know I basically said the same thing about Doom, but very chill in a different way. It's definitely way stronger on the more like funky, poppy, jazzy kind of like, well not so much jazzy, album where you just kind of want to sit there and just bop to it and just like kind of low-key dance, or just like sometimes some tracks, which my favorite track in the album, JoJo, just definitely makes you want to dance. And that's, I feel like, one of the biggest differences when I talk about like the chill difference between Mad Villainiya, where you're just kind of sitting there like laid back, just like bobbing your head, compared to the Camp Nowhere kind of chill, where it's just like kind of like you just want to like sit there and vibe along. It's kind of like you're just like you kind of hang out with your friends and you just put on something nice to play and just like nice and chill to fit the vibe, and you're just sitting there and kind of all just like vibing out to the same music. It's that kind of chill, I think. I definitely want to mention Genesis Owusu. I've been absolutely frothing recently, actually. Hold on. My Genesis Owusu shirt arrived the other day. Genesis Owusu, Goon Club. Actually, such a nice shirt. I've been really liking it. I try and wear heaps of artist merch. I've got my Mac hoodie on at the moment. But yeah, Genesis Owusu, he is such an incredible artist. I have been absolutely frothing his album, Smiling with No Teeth. It is, so far, easily my favourite album of 2021, actually. It's so incredible. I can't get over just how well he like takes his influences of music and just like puts them in this album. And just I listened to Fantano in his interview and found out the recording process for this album, and it just made me absolutely love it even more. It's LDR of the recording process. Basically, he got his manager, I think, to get together this band of just like crazy dudes and just like get them in this like small bedroom size room where they had all their instruments, and just I think it was like 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, just recorded, and just like in the hot heat of the Australian summer, just like 5 or 6 dudes in this one tiny bedroom, just like with all these instruments, just recording and just like playing non-stop for like 10 hours a day. Just absolutely chaos. Practically all of the album came from that recording process alone. Obviously, so much of it was, like properly produced and everything in the studio after the recording, but huge majority of all of the music came from that recording process, which is so fucking awesome to me. But yeah, Smiling with No Teeth is an incredible album. Its main influence is Prince, which is really cool. I need to listen more into his discog, but still like such an incredible influence for this album. Just it's so heavily R&B based, but then he gets influences from like very obviously Death Grips, because the intro track of this album, I genuinely, when I heard it the first time, my flatmate Zach played it, and I was like, is this Death Grips? I actually asked him if it was Death Grips playing because I hadn't heard the track, and he was like, no, this is just Genesis Owusu dude. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of him. This was prior to me actually looking into the album, and so I looked into the album, and it's so killer. It's just like so perfectly this R&B hip hop based album with like I said, Death Grips, Prince, Kanye, Kendrick influences. It heavily touches on like depression and racial injustice within the album, which is obviously a very important and hot topic at the moment, I guess. I don't want to speak too much on it. I obviously don't think I could do it any justice. I think listening to this album will obviously give you the impression of what he was intending. It's incredible. He uses Black Dog as an allegory for depression and also kind of racial injustice, because he does mention in the interview he's been called a black dog like in Australia just because he I believe he migrated from Africa when he was really young to Australia, and growing up in Australia as an African, he would undergo probably a lot of racial injustice and racism and thing. The track I do want to mention specifically is Waiting On Ya. I honestly think this is my favourite track of the year. On top of this being my favourite album of the year, it is just such a genius track. I really, really love when artists make very original music, and it just seems like a very original, just like such a genius song. I just really can't recommend it enough. So I would highly recommend going and listening to this album. Next, I just want to jump right into it because I've been talking quite a lot and I still have only got about halfway. Next, Marlin's Dreaming Quotidian. This album is so beautiful. My really good friend Ruby, this is still her favourite album from last year. I think it was a quarantine album, yeah. And you can see that heavily in the influences of the album when they're talking about being inside and not being able to go out and all these things. I know obviously they're a New Zealand band. We got very lucky in the sense of COVID because we didn't have to go through too long of a lockdown. We only had a good, I would say 4 or 5 months max of proper kind of lockdown in your house, not being able to leave. But for the most part we were really lucky in the sense that we got to actually get out quite early and be able to live our lives quite normally, which is really lucky. But that does not take away from the fact that this album really heavily uses the lockdown influence to make just such an incredible piece of art, and I can't recommend it enough. It has got some of the most just amazing tracks on it, just obviously talking about topics like depression and different things that, you know, obviously a lot of people faced during lockdown when it was like a really hard time for everyone, like no one could leave the houses, like all of these things were obviously really significantly impacting them in their lives. And I know Marlin's Dreaming, they flat together, so they were able to still create music, and we in return got a really fantastic album out of that, so it's really fantastic. I would highly recommend Sink or Swim, my initial favourite track on the album, and obviously the outro track Filling in Time. Highly recommend, please listen. Next album I want to get to / artist is AG Club. I've only recently started actually listening to AG Club, and I'm not going to talk about them too much because there's not heaps to talk about, but the two things I want to talk about are their two most recently released albums. It's Fuck Your Expectations Part 1 and Part 2. Sorry, my mice were rustling about. These two albums, two-part album, really fantastic. I really see, I'm not sure if I would say an influence necessarily because I'm not sure, I haven't looked into them too much, but I get very heavy Brockhampton-esque energy from Part 1 and Part 2. I'd say Part 1 is more early Saturation-esque, kind of like bangers, and Part 2 is getting much more into the R&B side, so like, I'd say in terms of, because Part 1 is much more focused on these kind of banger tracks where it's just like a lot of like sirens, heavy like instrumentals, heavy bars, just like going at it, just really upbeat kind of banger tracks, yeah. But Part 2 really goes into more the R&B based singy song kind of side of the albums, but also finishes with some very heavy banger tracks. But yeah, I would really recommend both of them. I do genuinely think some of the tracks from especially Part 1 really go hard, like Columbia and Truth, and a lot of these tracks just slap. Like, you'll listen to them and you'll be like, how have I not heard of this? In the album, there is actually an interlude track where Zane Lowe actually just sits there and rants about how killer these guys are and how much they just bang and just slap. Like, they're talking about especially the track Columbia. This is right before Columbia plays in the album, and they say they've played like 3 times already, and it just goes so hard, and he just can't get enough of these dudes. So I feel exactly what he felt when he was talking there. Like, the first time I listened through this album, I was just like, how have I not heard them? Like, they actually go so hard, and they're actually quite a popular artist. I believe when I looked into their Spotify, I saw they had over 1 million monthly listeners, which kind of surprised me because I hadn't heard of them at all. But that makes me think maybe they had like 1 or 2 songs that like really blew up and maybe got put into some playlists. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they are actually just a really popular artist. But yeah, if you haven't listened to them, I really highly recommend listening to Part 1 at least, because it's just such a killer album. Yeah, highly recommend going and listening to those albums. You will probably get at least a couple tracks that you will really enjoy off of them, so yeah. Okay, I'm really quickly going to talk about the last 3 artists because I've spent way longer than I thought I had talking about everything else. KAYTRANADA, IAMDDB, and SZA. So yeah, KAYTRANADA. Canadian producer, his album Yeah, the album Bubba, I've been listening to quite a lot. The Mick Jenkins featuring track and 10% are my two easily top tracks from that album. I think 10% is quite a standalone track. Highly recommend, please go listen, it is really fantastic. IAMDDB, so their album Swerve 5 is really good. It's quite a small album, it's got like quite a few banger tracks, but also quite a few low-key kind of R&B tracks. I think easily the standout track in this album is Urban Jazz. It's the intro track to the album, which I'm a big intro track fan. I think intro tracks really have to be strong, and it is absolutely strong. It sets the entire album and probably is actually the strongest in the album alone, but yeah. SZA. So I just really want to mention Good Days and Kiss Me More. Obviously, Kiss Me More is Doja Cat's song, but featuring SZA. Obviously, both these tracks really fantastic, especially Good Days. I think very recently she just released the pre-order for the 10-inch vinyl of Good Days alone, which I'm definitely going to get because that looks really gorgeous. It's this gold-plated vinyl, but yeah. Anyways, these two tracks are really fantastic. Would highly recommend them. Both came out this year, and I'm really just looking forward to a SZA album, which is the reason I wanted to mention her, because oh my gosh, it has been 4 years since she's released an album, and Control is so good. It's been heavy in my rotation since release, and I really want to release an album and just like take over this year. I know I said those were my last quick three, but honourable mentions just without much context. So Homebrew's Last Week album and HEIM Women in Music Part 3, both really fantastic albums, and would really highly recommend both listening to them. Yeah, those are all of my albums and songs, kind of artists I've been listening to as of recently. So I really hope you get something out of this and go and listen to some of these tracks and get some new music. But yeah, ka kite, have a nice night.